Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About This. My guest today is Dr. Maureen. Dr. Maureen is a pediatrician. She's an allergist, immunologist, life coach, and author who specializes in supporting parents of chronically ill children. She is a mother of three amazing children and has firsthand experience with being a parent of a child with long-term health issues. Her daughter is a pediatric also, and she's a neuroblastom. How do you say that? Neuroblastomy
Yeah, so my daughter
survivor
is,
diabetic. Uh,
yep,
all right.
neuroblastoma is a type of pediatric cancer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't pronounce that word. I took medical terminology years ago, and a lot of the terminology I just forgotten and cannot pronounce. So
No worries.
So thanks for helping me with that, Dr. Maureen. First, I want to say thanks for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate that. I always want to say that to the guests, because I'm always, I try to tell all my guests, I'm always appreciative when they come on to share some valuable, information and life stories and, things that can help people who are watching. My audience seems to be growing and I'm excited about that. But yeah, welcome to this podcast and let's get right into it. First, I wanted to talk to you about your background. Are you a single parent or are you a married parent or?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of my story and then kind of let you drive with any sort of questions that you think your audience would be receptive to. I'm super excited to be here, and I love the work that you do and your ability to share stories with your audience. As a kid, really had two goals: the goal to be a mom and the goal to be a pediatrician. That those two goals I was very fortunate to achieve. And when I was a pediatric resident, so I was in my third year of residency, my daughter, who was my second child, was diagnosed with pediatric neuroblastoma, which is a type of pediatric cancer.
Okay.
And during that time, I kind of watched my world crumble. And that goal of being a mom, I felt like it was going to be snatched from me. I was filled with fear. I was filled with being overwhelmed. I kind of went into a pretty dark place. Um, Things got better with some self-reflection, some supportive friends. And with time, the longer we got out from the diagnosis, the more kind of comfortable I felt with life. Um, then when she was 12, I got the honor of being the physician to diagnose her with type 1 diabetes, which again, I kind of watched my world crumble. Because I knew that that diagnosis was really something that was going to impact every day for the rest of her life, because there's no cure for her pancreas no longer making insulin.
Hmm.
So it was through that time that I kind of looked back on, what happened when she was an infant, and didn't want to go back to that dark place. I kind of went about trying to figure out how to not let fear and overwhelm and guilt like lead my life, and really got into learning about different tools in the coaching world that helped me really kind of reinvigorate my life. I realized that doing the work on myself was actually something that made me a better parent. And now I look back on, these struggles that I had as a parent, having this daughter with lots of health issues, and I'm grateful for those challenges that I faced. I wouldn't want them to be experienced by even my worst enemy, but
Right.
I'm grateful for them because I've become a better mom, a better physician, a better person who's able now to share my experience so that others are able to learn from me and have an easier time on their journey than I had on mine.
Right. Right. So, what tools did you learn to help you get through the emotional, distress that you were dealing with? When you had to
Yeah.
for care, when you had to care for your child. What tools did you learn?
Yeah. I would say, one of the biggest things I learned is that our minds are incredibly powerful. They can solve any problem that we're faced with, but they're also there to protect us and keep us in survival mode. So I realize that now when I was going through things with my daughter, my brain wanted to keep me in survival mode. So it was a lot of thoughts that would go on in my head. Like, I don't want my daughter to go through this, or I don't want my daughter to die, or I can't stand watching my daughter be in pain. And all of those thoughts lead to emotion. And I was letting my brain kind of lead the way and get out of control. So all of those thoughts would spin. The real tool that I found was really getting your thoughts out on paper. And journaling is such an important first step to where you really commit to writing your thoughts on a daily basis. And originally, when you start to do this, the thoughts aren't going to flow very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get better on practicing journaling, thoughts flow out with ease.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get them down on paper, you can take a look at them and be more objective about them rather than having them spin in your head and create emotions that don't serve us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the stories we have in our heads sometimes are stories that's not even true.
Absolutely, for
You know,
sure. Yeah,
yeah. So that does make a lot of sense.
yeah,
That's one thing that I've never actually done was actually write my thoughts down.
yeah,
I always wrote my goals down, and the things that I needed to do or things I needed to get accomplished. But I've never actually wrote my thoughts down. Now, when you
yeah.
say writing your thoughts down, is this anything that you're thinking, anything that's going through your
Anything.
mind? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what it is.
And I still do this every single day. And it is taking a journal, and it doesn't need to be any sort of fancy journal. It can be a notebook or um and just sitting with it. uh, some days I'll have a bunch of random thoughts that I'll write down.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I have to remember about the grocery store, or I'm upset because my daughter didn't clean her room or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
they may be random and not connected. Sometimes it's more flowing where it's a story, but what you said about there's stories that go on in our head, like when you write it, that story down and look at it, then it's the realization because you've distanced yourself from it. It's the
Mhm.
realization that that story is something that isn't even true, that we're not even certain if our friend is upset with us.
Mhm.
We have created that in our mind to protect us, perhaps,
Mhm.
from feeling like we are rejected by that friend. But so some days, yes, it's just random thoughts. Some days it's more kind of flowing stories. The biggest thing is don't judge yourself or judge the thoughts when you're writing them down.
Mhm.
That oftentimes we won't write it down because we're like, oh, that's silly.
Mhm.
No, just put it down because if you give your brain that space and freedom, that you begin to declutter your mind
Mhm.
and pick and choose what thoughts are actually able to serve you in your life to create the emotions that you want
Mhm.
that drive you towards a goal or an action.
That makes sense because we could take on an unnecessary load in our minds. You know, especially if you went through some sort of trauma. We tend to, because I remember I have to go back to what just recently happened to me, and I share this often, and I've shared this with previous podcasters, people guests who were on the podcast that I recently went through a traumatic situation, and you can find yourself living in that situation, you
Yes.
know. And slowly but surely, as I started educating myself about mental health and mental wellness, I started using those tools and started applying them to myself. And that kind of helped me get out of that survival mode,
Hmm.
like you were
Hmm.
saying.
Yep.
So that's really important for people to know who are suffering with any kind of mental issue, because we could find ourselves stuck there you know
Oh, for sure. And
Mhm.
that is such a valuable thing to reflect on is that some of the times that we are really spinning about things that happened in the past,
Mhm.
some of the time we're creating stories about what is going to happen in the future, and it is catastrophizing something that may or may not ever happen. So,
Exactly.
we by being able to get all of those thoughts out, we do a better job of being present in
Mhm.
the moment to um, let the past go
Mhm.
and uh, get more control over the future.
Mhm. Mhm. So in other words, we should live in the now and not in
Yeah,
because like you said, the things that we think that might happen will never happen, might not
right.
never happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like and I told a friend of this about this too, because she has this bad habit of always thinking negative. You know what I mean? Like, I always tell her, I said, why do you think negative all the time? Because you're putting unnecessary stress on yourself. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? And things might not be as bad as you think they might be. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times the outcome is not what she expected it to be, and I tell
Yeah,
her that all the time. But then sometimes I have to tell her, I said, you know what, I have to protect my mental wellness too,
right.
because if you're around me and you're constantly rubbing off of me with that negative, that can kind of affect me. So I kind of keep my distance, but still try to be a friend at the same
Yes,
time.
yes. So, I'm gonna comment on that negative part in just a moment, but just in thinking about, like, we think about all these things that could happen in the future. When my daughter was diagnosed with pediatric cancer and then with diabetes, people said to me, well, you probably had it easier because you're a doctor. And I, I can honestly say, I'm not sure it was easier. It was different.
Mhm,
And the reason I say that is sometimes being naive about what possibilities could happen can
mhm,
actually benefit us. But
mhm,
I was in a place where I had taken care of kids who had the same type of cancer as my daughter, and I
mhm,
knew exactly what complications that they had. So my brain was off to the races on, well, if this happened to little Johnny and little Sally, I know it's going to happen too to my daughter, and that she's going to suffer the same consequences.
mhm,
So keeping control of being in the present is so important,
mhm,
because it becomes a catastrophe if we let our brains kind of go off to the races.
mhm,
But, flipping back up to what you said about your friend being negative. So the other tool that I teach folks to do is, as part of journaling, I also say every single day you should write down 3 very specific things that you are grateful for.
mhm,
And what I mean by that is, you can't write down, I'm grateful for my kids. It
mhm.
needs to be specific.
Right.
I'm grateful for the conversation I had with my daughter yesterday.
Mhm,
So very specific. And I tell you, doing that 3 things every single day takes just a hot minute to do. And it is scientifically proven to improve people's happiness,
mm,
which makes sense because if you think about it, what you focus on is what your brain sees.
mhm,
For example, if you buy a red car, you drive down the street and all you see is red cars. Red cars are everywhere because you're so focused on a red car because that's what's been on your mind.
mhm,
There's no increase in red cars that are on the road. It's just that your mind is now paying attention to it.
mhm,
Same way with being grateful and doing a gratitude practice. You
mm,
focus on things in your life that are blessings, and
mhm,
you eliminate that negativity that your friend is experiencing.
mhm. Yeah, that's true. That's true because we tend to look too far
Yes,
instead of and I that's what I've been doing as far as my mental health and my overall mental wellness is I've been appreciating what's happening now in my life. You know what I mean? I appreciate the fact that I have a roof over my head right now.
yeah,
There's so many people out here who are struggling, who are homeless, who are on the streets, who don't have a home, having food. It's just little simple things. You know what I
yes.
mean? Just being able to be here, just being alive, just being healthy.
Hmm.
Things that and I think we could be our own worst enemy. I guess that's the word I'm looking for.
Oh,
Do
certainly can.
you agree with
Certainly
that?
can.
We could be our
Yeah.
own worst enemy sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And it comes from the perspective of failure.
Mhm,
And what I mean by that is, through my journey of parenting my daughter, uh, I also have 2 other kids, and I know along the way, whether you're a parent of a kid with health issues or not, you're going to make mistakes because none of us are perfect. And it is really your view of failure that allows you not to be your own worst enemy. So, failure shouldn't have a negative connotation.
Mhm.
Failure is just
Mhm.
data on how something went. It's, there's wins and losses.
Right.
And the wins
Exactly.
mean, hey, we need to keep doing this thing that got us a win. We
Right.
keep doing it. A loss just means, that didn't go the right way. I need to adjust course. But
Hmm.
instead, we are our own worst enemy when we look at that loss or that failure and beat ourselves up about it and
Hmm.
think to ourselves, I am the worst mom because this happened.
Hmm.
I should not be the mom to my kids because I can't believe I made this mistake. It
Hmm.
and wallowing in those kind of emotions of shame and blame don't allow us to move forward in
Hmm.
life. And if we want to move forward, it's reflecting on that failure and learning from it and knowing it's an opportunity to grow.
That's true. That's true because failure is just an experience. It's just a learning situation. That's the way I look at it. Okay, this didn't go right. Let's try something different.
Yeah,
And like you said, we tend to hold on to those failures, and and I think that also comes from the fact that we look at other people's lives. We tend to look at how successful other people are. And we see a lot of that all on social media. We see a lot of people who are successful, but we don't see the things that's what they put out there. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You know what I mean?
oh, that is so true.
Yeah.
You peel back that onion a little bit and it could look very different.
Hmm.
So the um seeing things on social media you really need to take with kind of a grain of salt. But
Exactly.
uh, comparing yourselves to others is a dangerous road to go down.
Right.
Um, it is okay to allow others to give us inspiration
Right.
or to give us motivation.
Right.
But when we start comparing ourselves to others
Hmm.
in a way that one is bigger and the other is smaller,
Hmm.
it is a dangerous path that doesn't have a good outcome down it.
That's true. That's true because I've talked to some people who have felt that they were worthless because they didn't have or achieve certain things in life. And I talk to people outside of this podcast and I tell them, no, you're not worthless. You don't know their situation and what they went through to get to where they needed to go. And it's not good to compare yourself to anybody because everybody's situation is different. Like you said, everybody's situation is different. And it is a dangerous path because you can find yourself depressed,
Yep.
and it affects your mental wellness. And I've actually, some people even goes to terms of suicide, and you don't want to get yourself to that point. So we should always, like you said, we need to look at ourselves individually and appreciate, the small things and the small. Like for me, what I do is I appreciate the small goals. If I
Yes.
if I got, let's say, 3,000 subscribers. I'm happy for that.
Hmm.
I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, because I see growth. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I'm not comparing myself to someone who has 1 million subscribers or, it's growth, and people need to see more of that than to
Right.
see the outcome.
Yeah.
So,
And I will say, I love goals,
mhm,
love goals. And they give us direction,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't want to use goals against ourselves.
Right.
And so, I'll take your example about subscribers, right? Maybe you do have a goal of having 1 million subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
It is really celebrating along that journey
Exactly.
and looking at it through a very objective lens
Mm-hmm.
um, of, hey, I'm at, 100 subscribers. That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome because they're 100 more than I had last week. Now
Exactly.
I'm at, 1,000. Oh my gosh, like look how much I've grown
Mm-hmm.
along this. Like I've gotten quicker at finding podcast guests or quicker about editing the pod, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the journey that we really need to be appreciating and celebrating along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, you don't stop and say, ah, I didn't get 1 million subscribers, so this I'm no good, and
Right.
you give up on it. You
Mm-hmm.
keep working and adjusting course along the way
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what's working. And if something's not working, reflecting on it to figure out what change you can make to make it work.
Right, exactly. And then another thing is, I noticed that, with this technology and this new era we're in with this social media, because, a lot of us probably wouldn't want to be on it if we didn't have businesses. But unfortunately, we have businesses, so we have to use it. But, when you have a business, it's a situation where they tend to have you look at the analytics of everything that you're doing, and I kind of get away from that. I find myself getting away from that because I want to focus more on what the purpose is. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? The
Mm-hmm.
purpose is to help people who are dealing with mental health issues. I don't want to have to be focused on numbers because people be like, oh, you need to focus on this number and you need to focus on that number and whatever. No, that's not my purpose. My purpose is to share valuable information with my audience who are going through some mental health issues, things, because they might not have the tools or they might not know how to go about taking that next step towards
Mm-hmm.
coming out of that dark space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
that's really where I'm at. I try to get away from numbers and things like that, even though it was suggested to me. People
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, you need to get this many. You need to get this many subscribers." I mean, I'm grateful from going from zero to this many subscribers, but that's I'm not. I don't want to focus on that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I think what you just said, there are two important things that it, that somebody should do when they're working towards a goal.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that you said that you want to focus on is your purpose. And so Simon Sinek, who's a fantastic speaker, talks about how everything starts with a why. And that why is our purpose. Why are you doing this podcast? Well, I want to help others. And that
Mm-hmm.
really grounds you towards a goal.
Mm-hmm.
But the analytics are also important, not
Mm-hmm.
to, again, not to beat yourself up about it,
Right.
but it's data there to figure out how to achieve your why.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, watching growth of subscribers to a podcast will allow you to figure out what's working, what's not working, so that you can better focus on achieving that purpose, which is really helping more people.
I see.
So I think both are important. You
Right.
are correct that the analytics are data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something to beat ourselves up about it. And
Mm-hmm.
we do this to ourselves over and over again in life.
Mm-hmm.
And, that in parenting a child with health issues,
Mm-hmm.
you can do that again and again on beating yourself up,
Mm-hmm.
especially, I mean, my daughter now with diabetes, it, watching her blood sugar is is data, but
Mm-hmm.
I look at the sometimes and need to catch myself to
Mm-hmm.
not beat myself up about if her blood sugar is too high or blood
Mm-hmm.
sugar is going too low.
Because
That
it's not your fault.
it's right. And it's just how can I do something different next time?
Right. 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 Yeah, that's true. Because we tend to, that's true. It tells you what to do different, but also it keeps us from blaming ourselves.
Yes.
We have a tendency to blame ourselves when we think things go wrong. Like sometimes if our children turn out to not be the children that we expected them to be because we raised them a certain way, we tend to blame ourselves. Like you were talking about your daughter who's going through these illnesses. I'm quite sure you were blaming yourself at some point, when she was diagnosed with these things, and you had to take that blame out of your mind and focus on what you can do to help her. Am I
Yeah.
correct when I say that? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Oh
that's
no.
what
I,
yeah.
I mean the two big dangerous emotions or dangerous kind of thoughts are blame and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And, blame, you are correct that a parent who has a kid with health challenges often blames themselves. That's very common. And it
Mm-hmm.
leads to a lot of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really move forward and be a resilient parent if
Mm-hmm.
you're overwhelmed with guilt. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that it it is learning to again let it go
Right.
and be present in the moment. This is my current situation. This is the resources I have. I'm going to do the best I can right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things that like gets us out of this guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, like blame and shame are the two
All the
top
same.
things that get us into trouble.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. And that's definitely something we have to stay away from because it's easy to do. It's easy to blame ourselves. But we can't be our better selves for someone else unless we focus on ourselves first. And that's something else I've been doing a lot of is focusing on me coming out of, like you said, stop blaming myself for certain things that and getting these like we were talking about earlier, having these stories in our mind that aren't even true, because we like we was talking about earlier, we could be our own worst enemy sometimes, and it could be for reasons that we really should not. I just lost my train of thought.
No worries.
I just lost my train of thought all of a sudden. I forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, that blame and shame are two things we definitely gotta come out of. But being honest with ourselves, I learned that also. Be honest with yourself. Stop lying to yourself. If you feel a certain way, talk about it. Let it out. It's nothing to be ashamed of because sometimes we tend to think that we're the only ones that's going through certain things
Yeah.
you know but there's other people who are going through these same things, and they need to hear these conversations that we're talking about right now you know
Right. And
Yeah.
I want to emphasize something that you said just a moment ago about taking care of ourselves and that we can't do a decent job of serving others if we're not taking care of ourselves. And
Hmm.
that is such an important thing that
Hmm.
I just want to tell the parents out there that it is okay to take time to take care of yourself.
Hmm.
Taking care of yourself as a parent, especially if you're a parent who has lots on their plate because your child has lots of different health challenges, that
Hmm.
you still can allot a little bit of time every single day to taking care of yourself. Uh, and do what I was talking about earlier. Just spend a few moments writing down three things you're grateful for and getting thoughts out of your head and down on paper.
Hmm.
That can be enough to take care of yourself sometimes.
Hmm.
But we have to remember that when you're flying in an airplane, that they always say, put on your oxygen mask before you help somebody else put on theirs.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing that
Hmm.
as a parent, you're going to do a better job if you spend a few minutes making sure that you are resilient and courageous.
Hmm.
You'll be an extraordinary parent who is teaching their kid courage and resilience.
Hmm.
So do yourself a favor and allow yourself a little bit of time to take care of yourself. It doesn't mean you have to, have a spa day every week.
Right.
That it means taking a few minutes out of the day and focus on yourself,
Hmm.
not focusing on continuing to serve others around you.
That's true. That's true. Because we can't forget about ourselves, and it's easy to do, especially as women, as mothers, as parents. We have this natural thing about us where we tend to focus so much on everything and everybody else, and tend, forget about ourselves. And I'm starting to, that's good that you have to find that balance. You
Yes,
definitely have to find that balance. You definitely have to take some time out for yourself, and because it makes you a better person, and you can't help somebody else like we were saying unless we help ourselves first.
right,
So we
right.
can't forget about that.
Yeah. No, and I talk to lots of parents who there's resources out there like going to see a psychiatrist or going to see a psychologist or working with a life coach. And they always say, um, I don't have time. Like I have too much on my plate. I don't have time. And
Hmm.
I tell them having that time set aside to work with a coach or work with a therapist will 10x your time as a parent
Hmm.
because you'll do a better job in
Yep,
parenting.
that's true.
And so don't look at it as, oh my gosh, it's just another time suck. No, it's actually increasing the amount of time that you have in your day because your brain is getting refocused on the things that are important to build your resiliency.
Yep, it's very important. Oh, wow, that's some good information. I really appreciate all of this information because a lot of us don't have the tools or the information, to balance our lives. We have to take that information and apply it to ourselves, and that's what I've been doing a lot of.
Mhm,
I've been just applying, and that's what I'm grateful about this podcast and talking about mental wellness because I'm learning a lot from the guests, and the guests are learning some things from me.
mhm, mhm,
And we're sharing some valuable information to the audience, and to help people get through their daily lives too, which is important because life is going to keep life in. Like one of my good friends who's a mental health advocate. The experience with Kay. Hopefully she'll be watching this, but she always says this. She says life is going to keep life in, and she's right. Life is going to
Yeah,
keep life in. We just have to have. It's like having our armor, having our being prepared. We have our tools to use to get
yeah.
through this life.
Yeah. And it's also the realization that in life we're always going to be presented challenges.
Hmm.
Um, and those challenges, though, aren't going to last forever. That
Temporary.
life ebbs and flows, and those challenges will eventually be periods of celebration,
Hmm.
and then there'll be more challenges. And
Hmm.
that is okay. And
Hmm.
so rolling with it and understanding that, you know what, I am strong enough to um, climb that hill of the challenge because
Hmm.
I know that there's a downhill on the other side.
Hmm.
And it's understanding that and being committed to continuing to climb that mountain to be able to like look over the other side and realize how far you've come and how much you've accomplished during the climb.
Yep. Well, I like that. That's some good advice. Good advice. Dr. Maureen, I have to say that it's a pleasure having you here on the podcast. Thank you for coming on and taking the time out of your day to share, some valuable information. Is there any comments or any tips or any last minute advice that you want to give to the audience who might be struggling with coming to terms that they're not a failure, and coming to terms that like it's just temporary what they're going through. Any last minute advice you would like to share?
Yeah, I think I can sum it up by just saying it's going to be okay. I wrote a book about my story called Reclaiming Life, is the name of the book, that's available on Amazon. And that book has a lot of very practical tips about how to really know it's going to be okay, and tips to be able to reclaim your life to where you're able to dream and work towards your goals and not allow overwhelm and fear and guilt to be really in the driver's seat of your car in life. So I would encourage your audience to check that out. It's full of
Okay.
other tips, but just knowing it's going to be okay.
You heard that, son? I have to tell my son that. It's going to be okay, son. My son came to visit me a few days ago. He was going through some things, and I told him, I gave him a big hug, gave him a kiss, and I said, son, it's going to be okay. You know,
Yeah,
don't be so hard on yourself. My son's a firefighter. He has a list of everything. He's a CPR director. He has a whole credential of things. His life, and I'm sure he's overwhelmed with so many things, including in his personal life. So I told him, I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be
yeah.
okay. And hopefully you're going to tune in and watch this podcast and get some of these valuable tools that Dr. Maureen is dropping right now. But thanks again, Dr. Maureen, for coming
Oh,
on.
no, thank you for
Uh,
having me. This has been wonderful. I appreciate your time and listening to my story and tips. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you. Oh, and before we go, do you have any social media or social media pages that people can follow you on?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is maureenmichellemd.com, and Michelle is spelt with one L. I'm also on Instagram at Maureen Michele MD. And again, Michelle is spelt with one L.
Okay, that's my sister's name too. Hers is spelled with two L's though. All right, Dr. Michele, thanks again, and you have a great day, and you take care of yourself.
Thank you. Be well.
Okay, bye-bye.